make a full and complete education a human right in America to which all of our people are entitled. This means making public colleges, universities, and HBCUs tuition-free and debt-free by tripling the work-study program, expanding Pell Grants, and other financial incentives.
Bernie Sanders is doing it. He's making education debt-free. What you just heard there was Bernie Sanders along with Jayapal and Ilhan Omar, who's putting a corresponding bill in the House. Essentially, they have two bills that are coming together, essentially doing what Sanders is doing in his bill. But essentially to wipe out cancellation of all student debt. Elizabeth Warren's bill went far. Sanders' bill is going farther. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yes, one Mr. Bernie Sanders has come out with a bill that is essentially going to wipe out all student debt. This is absolutely awesome. I want you to hear Representative Ocasio-Cortez, who's talking about this. She makes this argument that college loans are a scam. And I have to be honest, I couldn't agree with her more. I'll explain what I mean in a few.
Restaurant, and it was literally completely honest. I will disclose my personal stake in this fight because I have student loans too. And I think it's so funny. A year ago, I was waiting tables in a restaurant, and it was literally easier for me to become the youngest woman in American history elected to Congress than it is to pay off my student loan debt. So that should tell you everything about the state of our economy and the state of quality of life for working people. Because in order for me to get a chance to have health care, in order for me to get a chance to pay off my student loans, I had to do something that was nearly impossible. And I don't think that that is the bar through which a person should be able to access education, health care, and a bevy of other things that should be considered human rights. And
I could not agree with her more. I could not agree with her more. Your ticket to ride, meaning your ability to get into a decent job in this country to some degree, is almost the door you need to go through is an education. And then walking through this door, there's somebody who's standing there looking at a 17-year-old said, son, if you want to have any notion of a better life, if you want to be able to have that decent job and car and house that we continuously tell you that you should indeed want, sign. Take the $50,000 loan that you need to get in order to get that education. It's astonishing. In the document, now I'm going to put it in the article, some of the research, there's a 12-to-1 wealth gap between blacks and whites. I knew about the wealth gap. And in fact, I even knew it was stark, but I didn't have the numbers at hand. 12-to-1 wealth gap. The moment you take out college loans, it goes 5-to-1. Think about that. There's a 12-to-1 wealth gap between black households and white households. When you take out college loans, that goes to 5-to-1. That means that there are African Americans that are doing what they can to get a better life in this country, and trying to get that better life in this country, they accept massive amounts of debt. And in accepting those massive amounts of debt, some of them don't get their degree, which means they're saddled with the debt without having the ability to really pay that back with a job that pays it back. And in some cases, even when they do get it, maybe they turn into school teachers that get paid little or nothing because we don't pay teachers in this country. And in some cases, they do well. Some people roll the dice. They end up like Ocasio, getting a decent position where they can pay that back. But a large share don't. And a large share don't. And even when they do make it, they're still stuck with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. That number is astonishing. Let's hear Sanders continue with this. But this is paid for, by the way. He's paying for it through Wall Street speculation. Wall Street. There's essentially a tax on Wall Street that he's applying in order to pay for the proposal that he's putting forth. Some of the research shows that doing this, because you must understand, people are, when they take this on, this notion of having a child, this notion of getting a mortgage, meaning getting a house, like all of these things to some degree go out the window. Getting married. I had to have a conversation with my wife. Her and I even questioned on whether or not we should even get married based on college loan debt. I am not atypical. I am the typical person in this case. This is something that is saddling us, meaning our society. And that one point, if I'm not mistaken, $6 trillion. It is an astonishing sum based on the way we've organized the system of kids getting education after their main school. Let me ask you, do you want kids to go to college or not? If that answer is yes, why are you punishing them for doing so? Your society depends on these kids getting education. Think of it this way. I often make the same argument for people talking about this notion of people getting higher wages and getting better, getting further into their workspace, meaning more agency in their workspace. Whatever you did today, you did something. Outside of just sitting in a room, and even if you were just sitting in a room, the argument still applies. Whatever you did today, whether you went to get coffee, whether you went just driving on the street for a scenic stroll, whether you went to a doctor, whatever you did, it included some level of work. It included something that somebody did, a person. That person, whether it served you coffee, somebody had to get you that coffee, somebody had to bring that coffee to the country, somebody had to make that coffee in a way that you could drink it, somebody had to make the bags that the coffee was brought in, somebody had to create the street, somebody had to construct that, somebody had to go to school in order to understand how to construct city planning in this case, somebody had to create the light switches, somebody had to create the lighting on the streets, the electricity to get from point A to point B. My point is, anything that you did today required somebody to have some level of work, some level of experience in order to make your society go in the way your society goes. The continuum, if you want to call it. When a kid is 16, 17 years old, those kids look up and try to figure out how are they going to fit within this grand continuum of work, of people doing these particular things that we want those people to do. And we give that kid this Faustian bargain of a loan in order to do this. We, all of us, are entirely dependent on what happens in regards to the larger continuum of which people work and go about their affairs. And yet, we punish these kids for trying to get into that continuum in a way that is in their best interest, but also in ours. It is in our best interest for those kids to go to school. It is a roll of the dice, just like everything else is a roll of the dice. Some of them are going to do amazingly well. Some of them are going to build the next cities. Some of them are going to help construct the next program, the next thing, the next widget. I was reading today that they've come up with a device to cure kidney failure. Somebody had to go to school for that. Somebody had to figure out how that works. Do you really want to punish and penalize the guy that's going to school in order to learn that? Not all of these guys will be people who create devices like that, but some of them will be. And the fact that some of them will be is enough in and of itself for us as a society to try to cover this, because it is in our best interest to do so. My point, and I hope my larger point is not lost here, all of the things that make our society go require somebody to learn and know something to make that work. It is not where we shouldn't penalize these people, meaning we shouldn't penalize these people for doing this. This should be something that we prize and that we push for in our society. I don't understand this notion of punishing people for trying to get an education, especially when that education is in our best interest collectively. $7 trillion. We spent $7 trillion in that last war in Iraq. $7 trillion. We are still there. And at no point in that conversation did I hear anybody raise their head and say, how much is it going to cost? Murder, slaughter, mayhem. They didn't even do it. They didn't even do it. They weren't even responsible for the crime to which they were charged, and we bashed that country to smithereens. Over 1 million people dead. They didn't even do it. $7 trillion spent. And someone raises the question of, can we spend money to ensure that our kids get a decent education without this thing on their heads that is adversely affecting even us as an entire society? Is it okay that we make sure that these kids get a decent education? And the question becomes, how do we pay for it? I have a 10-year to that question, considering everything else that came before it. And like I said, it is in the best interest of our society to do this. I mean, I understand. Our society literally depends on people going to school, getting an education. And let me ask you this. Do you think more or less people will go to get an education, especially people that want to go to get an education, if they had the capacity to do so? And do you think, just on probability scale, you will get more or less people that helps push and propel your society forward? Meaning you're uncorking the box on innovation by allowing people to go to school without punishing them to do so. This is a tremendous idea. This is a tremendous idea. And it goes beyond it. There's research to back up what I'm saying on this. So first part. Of course, this sort of legislation is expensive. Sanders, Omar, and Jamarl say that they expect significant boosts to the economy, which helps cover the costs. A February report from the Levy Economics Institute of Bard College found that wiping out $1.4 trillion in student debt would lower the unemployment rate, create new jobs, and boost the gross domestic product by as much as $108 billion per year for the next 10 years following debt cancellation. Sanders, along with Representative Barbara Lee, has already put forward legislation to pay for the plan by imposing a small tax on the trades of stocks, bonds, and derivatives, which would generate, they estimate, up to $2.4 trillion over 10 years. Not only do they submit the plan, they even put forth the way to pay for it. Win-win. Win-win. Let me let Sanders tell a little bit more about it. The article goes further into some of the surrounding context. So right here, let's get into the difference between Sanders' plan and Warren's plan. Warren's plan is some degree partial debt forgiveness, and there are certain caps on depending upon income level. Sanders' plan cancels it outright. The Sanders bill eliminates all student debt, whereas Warren's plan, while still substantial, covers $1.25 trillion for 42 million people. The difference is that Warren's plan has caps. Warren's proposal forgives $50,000 in student debt for every person with a household income of $100,000. People between $100,000 and $250,000 in household income would then have a portion of their debt forgiven, and people above that amount would get no cancellation. So Warren's plan is essentially, look, if you're wealthy, no. If you're not, you're covered. Basics. So let's see. Partial debt forgiveness won't cut it, said Pamela Hunt, a mother with 4 kids with 4 student loans. Erasing $50,000 would leave me with a balance of $126,000 in student debt. We are so brutal to our children. So brutal. Sanders' bill will also cap interest rates at no higher than what the federal government pays for its debt, so that the government isn't profiting off the student loan program, and provide at least $1.3 billion per year to eliminate or reduce tuition and fees for low-income students at 2 to 4 year private, non-profit, historically black colleges and universities. In a statement, Sanders called his proposal truly revolutionary. All right, and I'm going to let you hear what Sanders said, because Sanders basically nails it. I have to be honest. This makes all the sense in the world to me. Why are we burdening our children in this way? And not just our children, ourselves. At which point are we so atomized and individualized where we can't necessarily understand that something may be better for the whole, and some things, when we work in tandem as a whole, are just better off? Do you want a society that unleashes innovation? Do you want a society that is just saddled with trillions of dollars of debt for kids with the temerity to get an education? Some people make it, yes. But the point of view shouldn't be through the few that make it and can pay off these loans. The point of view needs to be from the standpoint of, is this for the best? And if it's not, we should change it. I would argue we should change it. What Sanders is proposing here is right. It's economically right. It's rationally right. But also, for just the people who are growing up in our society, who are saddled with this, who are hounded by this. Do you realize they even go after Social Security checks? You could be 65, 67 years old, finish all of your work and everything else, and they would still come after you and take your Social Security check. You may be living off that check, by the way. They don't care. They don't care. We can do better as a society. A different world is possible. Just have to change it.
Today we are entering a proposal which will allow every person in this country to get all of the education that they need to live out their dreams because they are Americans. Further, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it is simply not acceptable that our younger generation, through no fault of their own, will have a lower standard of living than their parents, more debt, lower wages, and less likelihood of owning their own homes. That is why this proposal completely eliminates student debt in this country and ends the absurdity of sentencing an entire generation, the millennial generation, to a lifetime of debt for the crime of doing the right thing, and that is going out and getting a higher education. 10 years ago,
I'm going to put this video below. Keep in mind, we tell our kids, we want you to go to school. We want you to get an education. We want you to be somebody. And by somebody, that just means within this particular society. We tell them that you should want a higher salary. You should want XYZ for yourself. And the conduit through which that is typically found is through education. Now, you don't always have to go to school. And Sanders is not putting a gun to people's head and saying you're going to school. He is just trying to incentivize people to do so. It is in our best interest as a society for people to go to school and get an education. These will be the jobs of the future. These will be people creating those jobs of the future. It is a roll of the dice. Some people will finish, some people won't. In either case, I don't want people who don't finish, who tried, who may need to find something else, to be saddled with debt for trying. I don't want that. I don't want that. We should not want that for our youth. We shouldn't want that for other Americans. Well, one Mr. Bernie Sanders is trying to change that. And I could not agree with him more. Could not agree with him more. Could not agree with him more. Borrow money, pay it back. Why not lower cut rate? Because not everybody can afford it. And not everybody is going to even make it. Like, say for the moment, for example, I have an illness. I go to school. I go to school because at the age to which I get that illness, it's in this kind of weird area where you're not into a career yet. You're not into anything yet. You're not even finished school yet. And yet, if you're going to get any level of money to be able to cover yourself, you got to go to school. The amount of money that the government gives you for something like Medicare or Social Security is not enough to live off. So you're stuck in somewhat of an area. What do? You find that your way of getting out of this is to go into school. If you get an education, the job that you get after you get an education will pay you enough where you can get off of governmental systems like Social Security, Medicare, and so forth, and you have your own insurance, and you can kind of live your life. How do you do that? How do you do that without getting an education? Meaning you got to get loans. So you get 30, 40,000 in loans, and you may get a little bit of it back. And you get ill, bang, first year. Oh, you still got those loans. Now, what do? Okay, you go back to school because they allow you to go back to school and you don't have to pay back as long as you're going back to school. So you go back to school. You get ill again next year. You're stuck with those loans either way. Say you don't get ill. Say it's some other reason. Maybe somebody else in your house will get ill. Something happens, it pulls you away. You can't finish school. Say you do finish school and you end up being in something like the school teacher. The basic question is this. We get stuck in our ways. And we think just because we do something a particular way, we should continue to do things in that way. I disagree with that premise. Just because you do something a particular way doesn't mean it's right. How do you unleash economic potential in this country? How do you unleash that fervent thing in people when they want to go and be better? And by saying be better, I just mean they want to educate themselves into whatever degree they want to educate themselves. And I want them to do that. If that guy wants to be a physicist and it burns in him, I don't want this fact that he has a $50,000 loan and he doesn't want to have to deal with on his head, nor after he gets out of school, do I want it on his head. Nor should you. Nor should you. Yeah, that's where I'm going with that, because there's a certain selfishness that's associated with this, where we look at it and we say, oh man, I had to pay mine back, so I don't want that guy to get past. Or I don't want to have to pay back somebody else's loans from the standpoint of taxation. And in taking a position like that, we hamper all of us, meaning we are hurt by the disposition of selfishness that we take in these processes, in these pursuits. Do we have a better world when people are able to go to school and and go to the level of their abilities? Yes. And are you telling me the richest country on the planet can't afford it? I don't believe that at all. Nobody complains when we talk about paying for something to blow something up, even when we don't need it. Hey, let's ensure that kids don't have debt on their heads that hound them for the rest of their life. Oh man, that seems like that's too expensive. That seems like it's too expensive. Just because something has been a particular way doesn't mean it should always be that way. Do you realize in other countries they pay kids to go to school? Why? Because it makes all the sense in the world that those kids, when they go to school, are going to do things that are going to be in the best interest of that society. It is going to push and propel that society forward. So goddamn right, I'm going to pay, if I'm the government, to get more kids in school. I want as many kids in school as possible. I want adults, if they want to go back to school, to go to school. I want everybody to go for whatever they want to go for. That's what I want. I'm not forcing it at all. But do I want them to go? Yes. Yes. I want them to study. I want them to learn. I want them to create businesses, companies, factories. I want them to dispose themselves of all of the knowledge and say, I want all of that. And I want to incentivize that. And the last thing I want to do is punish them for that. You can think of this in two ways. You can think of this as, I can make a profit off of these children. And I regard that in the same way I hear people saying, making a profit off of somebody's cancer. This child that's literally trying to get within the flow of society, and the first thing you do is hit him with a loan. I'm going to punch him in the face with a loan. Do you understand what that means? Why? Why do you need them to do that? That kid at some point is going to get a car loan. He's going to get a house. He's going to get a mortgage. He's going to all of these things. All of these things he's going to have to get into the flow of society. He will already get hit with those things. Do we need to hit him with it at 16, 17 years old when he's trying to just get into the flow of life? Balthazar, why can't students become too big to fail? And then Warren, the bailout, want to calm so badly. Claim, wait. Why can't students become, quote unquote, too big to fail? And then, quote unquote, Warren, the bailout, they want to claim so badly. The banks did it. Why can't they, quote unquote, Nate's liver? Let me say it again. Why can't students become too big to fail? Essentially, look, our students, are they not important? Don't we want them to be, meaning, is it not in our best interest to have these kids and to invest everything that we can in these kids so these kids will become successful? The answer is yes. Why can't students become too big to fail? And then Warren, the bailout, they want to claim so badly. The banks did it. Why can't they? The banks were too big to fail. Why can't students be too big to fail? They're our kids. Are they not important? And is education not important? And is that not something we should want to incentivize? And why do you want banks making a profit off of children who are just trying to get an education? Stolen ideas. This is just another case of Bernie stealing Warren's ideas that were stolen from Bernie, who stole them from Hillary Clinton, who stole them from Bernie. Political super analyst Nate Sliver. This is another case of Bernie stealing Warren's ideas that were stolen from Bernie, who stole them from Hillary Clinton, who stole them from Bernie. Political super analyst Nate Sliver. Kills for a living. Oh, okay, that was the other one. That's funny. That's funny. Because Bernie Sanders has always made this argument that education should be a human right. I agree with him. Why shouldn't we invest in our kids? I don't understand that. Like, think of all the things that we need from the standpoint of a society. We need people to build the new level of technology. We need people to create the new jobs. We want people to get an education. We push them out. We push them constantly From the time they were children to the time they get to the, teenage years where they're about to go into school. We push them constantly. What do we do? Push them so we can rape them later on with a bill that they were going to have for the rest of their life? We can do better. Shout out to one Bernie Sanders. I'll end it here. Thanks all.